Multiple Colorado Avalanche updates that have huge implications for the Avs as a depth defenseman in Jacob MacDonald has undergone off-season hip surgery, which will take him out of the lineup and make him unavailable for 5 to 6 months for the Colorado Avalanche to utilize him, barring the need to pull any defenseman up from the AHL onto the actual Colorado Avalanche roster. Now, considering that Jacob MacDonald has some of the best defensive stats on the Colorado Eagles, the affiliate of the Avs, it's a massive topic that he will not be available for 6 months, especially considering he's coming off of one of the strongest performances of his career this last season, playing for the Colorado Eagles in the American Hockey League. We're going to dive all around into the conversation regarding MacDonald's unavailability for the next 5 to 6 months, as well as who the Avalanche can potentially rely on if need be, if they're having to pull from the Eagles as far as depth defensemen, barring any issues with the defensive pairings as they stand right now on the true Colorado Avalanche roster. Going to break down everything surrounding this injury and the implications today. Just a quick reminder to make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel here on YouTube. 69% of you guys watching our videos on a daily basis not subscribed to the channel. 30% of you guys, thank you so much for your support. If you're not subscribed, if you're an Avalanche fan, join the family, exit out of the video, hit that subscribe button. It takes 5 seconds. We really appreciate the support from each and every one of you. Thank you guys so much. Super excited for the Avs to kick their season off in just a little bit over a month here, early October. The Avs are back on the ice in burgundy and blue, kicking off the season. And I'm counting down the days until we get there. Let's kick things off and let's dive into this conversation around Jacob MacDonald, the veteran American Hockey League player who's bounced all around the league during his tenure as a professional hockey player. And after coming back to the Colorado Avalanche this offseason, he is now out 5 to 6 months after undergoing hip surgery this offseason. So we have lost him for a pretty solid chunk of the season. Underwent that pretty significant hip surgery just a few days ago and will not be available for not only the Colorado Eagles, but the Colorado Avalanche as well until around that February or March timeline. Now, you might be thinking that this isn't super relevant for the Avs, but if you really dive into the deep implications of what this really means to have arguably the top defenseman for the Colorado Eagles go under hip surgery and become unavailable for that allotted amount of time, it can have a lot of implications and it can be a pretty significant issue for the Avs heading into this offseason. And the reason that I say that is we know from the past, we know from some examples of players on the roster and just what, Chris MacFarland and Joe Sakic in the front office are doing within the Avs organization is they're known to pull guys up and down from the Colorado Eagles roster pretty frequently, especially considering that we're usually very injured. We have a lot of players who are unavailable and are out a lot of the time throughout the season. And Chris MacFarland and Joe Sakic, if there's one thing that they, like to do, it's they like to move some players up and down and around and get some people some true experience on the actual NHL roster. One guy that I think of who's looking to have a breakout year that's a kind of a key example of this is Ivan. He was up on the Avs roster for a decent chunk of last season, but also bumping down over to the Colorado Eagles and helping them with their depth offense and their, overall success, resulting in them making a pretty deep run in the Calder Cup playoffs this last season. So just diving a little bit into Jacob MacDonald, in his second stint with the Colorado Avalanche organization, he was with the Avs originally, and then he went over to the San Jose Sharks organization. Now he's back with the Avs. He spent all of last season with the Colorado Eagles, the American Hockey League affiliate, and he had his best professional offensive season to date. He wore the A on his sweater last season. He had 31 goals and 55 points in 63 games played with a plus 24 rating. His 2024-25 performance was extremely impressive to the point that he won the Eddie Shore Award as the league's top defenseman. That's essentially the President Award for displaying excellence in all areas of the ice and a first-team All-Star nod. So for a guy who's been, in the league, circulating around different teams for a decent amount of time, considering that he had his career year last year, that's very strong and that's very notable as far as thinking about the future of the Colorado Avalanche and the depth that they're trying to build on all areas of the ice, especially with a guy like MacDonald. If you have a guy who's able to win awards like that and produce 30-plus goal seasons as a defenseman, that's very notable. That's very impressive. And, just to kind of continue that conversation, dive a little bit more into some of his stats in the past, he played one of his highest games played count throughout his entire career. Looking back with some of the times where he played with the Devils and the Springfield Thunderbirds, he had 75 and 72 games. But then after 4 straight seasons of being under 60 games, he gets back into that 63 game realm, shows off some health, and then, like I said, too, scores that 55 points, 31 goals, 24 assists. So just looking at everything that he's been able to do within the American Hockey League, it's notable and it's relevant considering that he's now not going to be available for a very large chunk of time. And then you even look at some of the time that he spent with the Colorado Avalanche, tallied 33 games back in 2020, 2021, had 1 goal and 8 assists for 9 points. Obviously that's a significant drop off of what he's been able to do as far as scoring production goes, excuse me. But just to see that he's able to produce any points back with the Avs, that's, very notable. And then 2020-21 played 8 games, didn't get any statistics there. But then, goes over to the San Jose Sharks organization in the 2023-24 season, and he gets 34 games, his career high in the National Hockey League, and he gets 7 goals and 2 assists for 9 points as well, his career high point count in the NHL. And so, considering now that he was, back in the Avs organization, had his career high year in the AHL, as we've talked about a few times already, it's kind of a stab in the chest considering that he's not going to be available as a depth defenseman to try to pull up and to try to utilize, kind of looking ahead to this next season, because obviously we have a very strong defensive pairing list. We have really, really talented defensemen, a lot of depth in that regard on the Avs roster, but barring any injuries, barring any issues where we need to pull defensemen, this would essentially be the guy. And the fact that he's now not available, there's a significant drop off as far as who is going to be available and who's going to be that defenseman, who's going to be that person who comes up the pipeline and joins the Avs organization, barring any need to pull defensemen up into the National Hockey League. So not a severe loss, but it is notable considering that without him available, it leaves players like Jack Ashawn and Ronald Attard, who will be kind of the two guys that come to mind as far as this conversation goes for who would get pulled up, who would essentially get used, considering any sort of need to pull up defensemen and replace guys on that bottom pairing, potentially anyone above that who needs replacement for any sort of injury or health related things. So looking first at Ronald Attard, he is a defenseman as well, a right shot defenseman playing within the Avs organization for the Eagles right now. And his, career, he has 29 games, 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. That's his entire time playing in the Colorado Eagles organization. And so, those numbers obviously a little bit lower than where, Jacob MacDonald's at and where that player is helping produce and where he's adding defensive depth to the Avs organization. And so that's a significant drop off. And then, that's kind of the biggest, conversation topic and the biggest issue regarding the fact that MacDonald's not going to be available for 5 to 6 months. We won't be seeing him back on the ice until minimum February, March. And then, you look at a player like Jack Ashawn, he's got 2 games with no goals, no assists, no points. And he's only played 11 games in his whole career, and he's only scored 1 goal. That's a significant skill drop-off as far as the defensive players that are available within the Avs organization to try to fill any gaps that maybe need to be filled throughout the season. And so that's kind of the biggest red alarm around this issue, is just how much of a drop-off there is within the AHL Avs Eagles talent for defensemen now that MacDonald is not going to be available and that he's going to be dealing with this hip injury throughout the foreseeable future. And so, you think about the Avs defensive roster, you think about the pairings. Obviously, Devon Taves and Cale Makar at the top, Josh Manson and Sam Girard in the middle, and then Sam Malinsky and Brent Burns in the bottom of those pairings. That might get moved around. That might get switched up to, depending on what Jared Bednar wants to do throughout the season with defensive play for the Avs. But if any of those players, if any of those, particularly bottom players on those defensive pairings end up with an injury, those two guys on the AHL are part of the pool as far as who would get to fill that gap, who would get to be a part of that, substitution. And the fact that our strongest defenseman on the Colorado Eagles is now unavailable, it has pretty significant implications for the Colorado Avalanche moving forward. And another little tiny small detail around all this is the Avs veteran and Stanley Cup champion Erik Johnson still remains an unsigned free agent this offseason. He was traded back to the Colorado Avalanche from the Philadelphia Flyers at the trade deadline this last season. Didn't see a lot of action after the trade, but if the Avs are looking to add any sort of defensive depth, in that area with the cap space that they have left, that's always something that they could consider. And we know that a guy like Erik Johnson, he's willing to take a very significant team-friendly discount to be a part of the Avs organization. Heck, he's even willing to shovel ice off the ice during games. He said that in a press conference at one point. Very funny little comment from Erik Johnson, just an absolute Avalanche legend. But anyways, just to round things out here, not a huge, massive thing to be stressed out about for Avalanche fans, but it does have notable implications considering that he's the strongest depth defenseman on the Colorado Eagles, and he's now unavailable for over the entire first half of the season.